As you'll know, it's my goal to beat Pokemon Yellow with every single one of the original 151 Pokemon. That is, the ones that can actually complete the game. And along this journey, I have had the privilege, well, it's sort of been a privilege, to play the game with some first stage poison types. So far, I've done Zubat, Coughing, Ekans, Nidoran male and Nidoran female, and finally, most recently, I have redone Grimer. Upon quick examination of my current tier list, we can see that these Pokemon have not performed particularly well. And by that I mean all of the first stage poison types have been really awful. Now right now you're probably looking at a Pokemon like Ghastly or Bellsprout and going, those are first stage poison types and they have really good results. Well, those Pokemon have good results specifically because their secondary typing is amazing. The Ghost type is amazing defensively, plus it gets the move Hypnosis, and Sleep is so good in Generation 1. Bellsprout, on the other hand, gets an even better sleep-inducing move in the form of Sleep Powder, so yeah, that's why it performs really well. And that leads us to Venonat, who is a first-stage poison type. However, the other typing it has, the Bug type, is not particularly useful. Actually, in this case, it is pretty much useless because the only move I'm going to get the same type attack bonus with is Leech Life, which in Generation 1 is base 20 power. Okay, so let's go through Venonat and see what we're in for today because I expect this to be a very rough ride. And that's largely because this thing has awful base stats. 60 HP, 55 attack, 50 defense, 40 special, and 45 speed, giving it an 8.59% chance to crit. Honestly, there isn't really a standout stat here. I guess it's nice that its attack is high, but most of its good moves are special. It starts with Tackle and Disable. Disable, by the way, has 55% accuracy, and you do not get to choose the move you disable, and it does not disable the last used move. It just picks randomly. So this move is really bad. After that, we get another 55% accuracy move, Supersonic, and then from there things start getting better. Confusion at level 19, Leech Life at level 27, that one's a bit weird, Psybeam at level 35, Sleep Powder at level 38, which is pretty late, and then finally Psychic at level 43, which is fantastic. Through TM and HM, it has limited options. Unfortunately, it only gets Takedown and Double Edge for normal moves. It doesn't get the more useful Body Slam or Swift. Conveniently, it gets Mega Drain and Solar Beam for a little bit of coverage, Psychic through TM, which is probably going to be how I'm going to learn it in this playthrough. Learning at level 43 is just way too late. Mimic will of course be useful, and I'm sure because of my playstyle I will find a way to use Rest. Now after all of this, I was kind of hoping that the growth rate would be the point of relief. However, it is the medium fast growth rate, which is the second worst one for the early game, and that's very bad, because the first major battle of the game is against Brock. So either I have to face him with Tackle, Disable, and Supersonic, or I have to train to level 19 to get access to Confusion. In Pokemon games, the AI trainers can have items. In more recent games, this is a fixed quantity of items for their entire team, so like 2 full restores or 2 hyper potions, something like that. However, in Generation 1, it functions a little bit differently. The trainer has a certain quantity of items, and they can use that number of items on each one of their Pokemon. And this is relevant because Brock has 5 full heals, meaning he has 5 for Geodude, as well as 5 for Onix. When I went into this challenge, I didn't actually know if the Generation 1 full heal cured Confusion or not. Turns out it only cures non-volatile status conditions, so Poison, Paralysis, Sleep, Burn, and Freeze, and starting in Generation 2, it can cure Confusion. So I will be able to use Supersonic as a tactic against Brock. Although that's not really a good thing because Supersonic has 55% accuracy. I think it's worth noting that Supersonic only inflicts confusion, whereas a move like Dynamic Punch, which only has 5% less accuracy, also has base 100 power. Yeah, this has to be one of the worst useful moves in the first generation. Like, of course, there are some completely useless moves like Razor Wind, but I'm not talking about those. So while I was playing, I had to decide which level I thought would be best to face Brock at first. And I figured because of damage rounding thresholds, I should probably fight him at level 15. With Tackle as my primary source of damage, and the fact I'm using a first stage Pokemon, I think going in at level 13 is just gonna waste time. I reached level 15 after finishing all of the trainers in Viridian Forest, as well as the Light Years Junior Trainer in Brock's Gym. Do note that I did not face the rival on Route 22, which means his final evolution will be Flareon. I'll talk about this more later in the video. For now, let's see how my first attempt against Brock goes. During the first attempt of this battle, I always like to keep track of two things: how much damage Geodude is doing to my current Pokemon, and how much damage I am dealing in return. In this case, Geodude is doing 4 damage per turn to Venonat, meaning it's going to take it 13 hits to knock me out. Luckily for me, it does look like Venonat is doing more than 1 damage per turn to Geodude, which is often not the case. However, Geodude has a total of 29 hit points, so it's going to take me 15 turns to knock it out, meaning it's going to knock Venonat out first. However, I do have the advantage that Supersonic and self-inflicted damage is going to deal more damage to Geodude, and it does waste one of its turns. This means it is possible for Venonat to move on to the Onix, which is what happens in the first battle. I have orange health remaining. However, against Brock's Rock Hard Snake, things are much different because it has so much defense, and there is no way Tackle is going to do more than 1 damage. Because I only have 28 PP and Onix has 32 health, I am going to have to rely on Supersonic damage here to get the knockout. There are a couple other interesting interactions here that I can play with to give Venonat a slight advantage. For example, Supersonic and Disable both can be used to stall Bide so that it doesn't accumulate more damage. Plus, Venonat is faster than Onix, so it's never going to deal any damage with this move. Also, interestingly enough, if Onix hits itself in confusion when it's using Bide, then it cancels Bide entirely. And finally, if Onix is using Bide and I use Disable, and it just happens to disable Bide, then Onix will have to wear out the Disable counter before it can actually continue using its current Bide. This means I can have additional turns to set up Supersonic to inflict confusion, or additional turns to attack with Tackle. Honestly, in some cases, this interaction gets very silly, and Onix can do nothing for an extremely long period of time. Unfortunately for me though, I do end up losing this first battle. However, I figured there was enough factors stacked in my favor that I should give it another shot. In my second attempt, I make it back to the Onix with green health. Things start out looking quite good with Supersonic and self-inflicted damage. However, eventually Onix gets a bind in which hits 4 times, finishing Venonat off. So as we go into the third fight against Brock, I know some of you will start to get uncomfortable and be like, you should just train, go up to level 19, get confusion, and then easily defeat him. However, I think that that's going to take way more time than just lucking through this fight at a slightly lower level. At level 15, I have enough health and defense to take minimal damage from the Geodude and then make it to the Onix with decent health remaining. This buys me the time I need to roll the dice at least a few times on the tactics that I mentioned before, and so in my third battle against Brock, I finally managed to finish him off and clock in with my first split of the run, 17 minutes and 47 seconds. We are off to a very slow start. And this pace is not set to improve, because there is an interesting decision that I have to make every time I'm doing a solo run whenever I head out onto Route 3, and that is how much time I want to invest in training. Because of how the overworld map works just outside of Cerulean City, once you complete the Mount Moon section of the game, you cannot backtrack to fight trainers if you decide you want more experience. So in all of my first playthroughs, I have to make an intuitive decision here, sort of judging based on what I know is coming in the next section of the game and the Pokemon that I am running. I thought that with Venonat, I would need some additional training, but not too much. So in the end, I face a few extra trainers in Mount Moon that are along the regular path that I would have to take anyways, and then I jump over the ledge into Cerulean City and head on to the next section of the game. The choice here is, do I face the Rival or do I face Misty? In this case, it's not really an obvious choice because the Rival has a Spearow that knows Peck as the lead Pokemon on his team, which could be problematic for Venonat. Plus, I am 1 speed slower than it currently. Also, just in front of Misty, there is a junior trainer with a Goldeen that knows Peck, so that's also going to be kind of tricky. I think that overall, facing Misty first doesn't really have an advantage, because earning the TM for Bubble Beam doesn't help Venonat in any meaningful way. Plus, the experience wouldn't give me enough levels to meaningfully change the damage ranges against the Rival. So I'm gonna face him first. The issue with this battle in Pokemon Yellow is the fact that so much can go wrong early on into the fight. So for example, the Spearow can hit for super effective damage with Peck, lower my attack with Growl, or my defense with Leer, and it could also get a critical hit with Fury Attack, which in Generation 1 will deal the same amount of damage on every hit. In this case, Growl won't affect Venonat because I'm going to be spamming Confusion for the entire fight. However, in my fight, I get what is possibly the worst outcome against the Spearow. It uses Peck twice, despite the rival not having good AI. The first Peck gets a critical hit, and then the second one takes me to low orange health before the Sandshrew even comes out. And this is the second portion of why the early portion of the rival's team is so difficult, because this Sandshrew can use Sand Attack. Now if it doesn't, it's going to use Scratch, which in this case is really bad because it takes me to red health. Luckily it fails its Sand Attack and I knock it out. However, from there the team does not get easier. The Rattata has Quick Attack, giving it priority, and it also has the ability to deal major damage with Hyper Fang. It takes Venonat to 4 hit points before I finish it off, and then finally I get to the Eevee, and this thing is here specifically to give Venonat a hard time today because it has decent special. I always find this quite surprising for Eevee since it's a normal type and it doesn't really learn any notable special moves. However, it makes sense once it evolves into its final forms. Today that just means that it tanks my confusions really well and Venonat gets a loss. I tried the fight again and I get back to the Eevee, however my health is low, so this is another loss. So there are only 2 trainers that I can fight now for more experience. The swimmer inside of the Cerulean City Gym, which actually gives really good experience yields by the way. So I defeat him, heal, and then I face the Goldeen trainer. In this case, Peck doesn't deal that much damage, so she isn't a problem. And now I have earned myself the right to face Misty. Instead of narrating this fight, I want to take the time to describe something that I find very strange about the Venonat line. As Venonat, it has high attack and low special. However, when it evolves to Venomoth, this relationship flips. It has higher special and lower attack. Of course though, these Pokemon are related, so they have very similar learn sets, and that synergizes quite well for Venomoth because all of the evolutionary line's best moves are psychic moves in Generation 1. However, that really does not help Venonat out, especially here against Misty. Her Pokemon have good special stats, meaning they hit hard with their water moves, and Confusion doesn't do that much to her. Also, the Starmie resists Confusion, making that one even more complicated. That's because it knows Harden and Misty has X defense, so if I want to use Tackle for neutral damage, then she can raise her defense and just take nothing. Like I said before, Confusion is resisted, so this isn't really the best choice. I thought that Supersonic for the status condition would be the best play, however this move is very inaccurate, so I get 1 reset. And that leaves me in a tricky position. I either have to face the rival, or Misty, or grind on low-level wild Pokemon. If you didn't know, the way experience is calculated, trainer Pokemon give 1.5 times the amount that wild Pokemon do, so leveling up now is going to be very slow. That's unfortunate for me, because my primary metric for evaluating my play in these playthroughs is real time, and I think I'm gonna start bleeding a lot of it now. Instead of training, I tried the rival again in hopes that I would get past his Eevee. However, this time the Rattata stops me. Okay, that is even less encouraging. So I guess I have to train on wild Pokemon. I do this until level 23, and then I head back to face the rival for my 4th attempt. Confusion is unfortunately not a 2-hit on the Spearow. Before I was getting critical hits, which were helping me out here. So I have to 3-hit it, which means I'm at half health by the time the Sandshrew comes out. Luckily though, at level 23, I am able to 2-hit this thing, and it misses Sand Attack. So, I've made it to the Rattata, Confusion gets a lucky critical hit, knocking it out, and now I'm in a good position against the Eevee. Confusion does a quarter, Eevee uses Sand Attack, my next Confusion misses, Eevee hits Tail Whip, lowering my defense. However, then it just fails a Growl, hits another Sand Attack, my Confusion does connect, for the next 2 turns, taking it down to 1/4, so I only need 1 more hit, and Venonat gets it. So, I've finally cleared the rival and earned passage onto Nugget Bridge. The clock is past half an hour. This is not going well, and that reminds me of a memory that I have from my childhood involving Venonat, where it also did not perform particularly well. I've talked before on the channel about my memories playing the trading card game with my mom. However, I have a different memory to share about the trading card game today. So I remember specifically when I was younger, finding base set cards and fossil cards was very hard at 7-Eleven. However, for some reason they seem to always have jungle packs, so I was opening a lot of these. And one of the cards that I found and absolutely fell in love with was Venonat. I think the reason I fell in love with this thing is probably because it shares a lot of design characteristics of Butterfree, who was at that time my favorite Pokemon. This This theory is always going to hold a special place in my heart, even though I am pretty sure it's not right. Okay, so back to the story. I love this card so much that I really wanted to build a deck that I could use it in, and I specifically wanted to play this deck against my dad. It's worth noting that at this time I was around 6 or 7 years old. I had been playing chess with my dad a lot at this point, and he never let me win. It was so frustrating. I could very easily beat my mom. However, every time I'd bring the chessboard to my dad when he was laying in bed, he would just easily dispatch me with like a 4-move checkmate or something like that, and I would get extremely frustrated. So I don't know why small Scott's brain thought that playing the Venonat deck against my dad was a good idea, especially when I really wanted Venonat to be the card that would give me the victory. And yeah, my dad just proceeded to quickly knock my Venonat out, and I had a complete meltdown. I cried on the floor, and my mom went to my dad and was like, "What did you do?" And my dad's like, "I just won." Yeah, Venonat is not a very good card. At least when it evolves in the trading card game, it gets a really cool Pokemon ability. After all the comments I get about Venomoth's type being incorrect in my videos, just look at this card. I am always right. Alright, so I finished Nugget Bridge, my Venonat is level 25, so let's head into Misty's gym and see if I can defeat her now. The Staryu is fairly easy to knock out. Because of a critical hit, I take it out over 3 turns and move on to the Starmie. The first turn it's in battle, I confuse it with Supersonic, it hits Bubble Beam, doing a decent amount, then it uses Harden. I use Poison Powder after that to try and stack up the damage per turn. After all, both Confusion and Tackle are not going to do very much to this thing. However, then the Starmie just crits with Bubble Beam and knocks Venonat out. So I didn't think it made much sense to continue trying this fight. Instead, I'm going to head to Vermilion City. Now, there are some potential obstacles along the way. First is this Rocket's Drowsy. It knows Hypnosis as well as Confusion. Luckily, it doesn't mess Venonat up today. After that, I have to face Sandy. She's known for her sand-attacking Pidgeys. Usually by this point in the playthrough, my Pokemon is one-hitting her team. However, Venonat's Confusion is doing just over half. As a result, I take an early Sand attack, but I knock out the second Pidgey fairly quickly, and then in a miraculous stroke of luck, I hit 2 more Confusions in a row, finishing her team off. The next junior trainer actually has a Spearow that knows Peck, so once again a Pokemon that Venonat is weak to. If you didn't realize it before, I hope you realize now just how stacked the early game is against this thing. Because things have not been going well so far, I'm of course going to pick up Rest. This is the safest choice in any playthrough. Then if you need recovery later on, you have an option. I didn't heal going into this fight. Surprisingly, Confusion does not even knock the Tentacool out. It doesn't even do more than half. However, I do get the 10% chance to confuse, Tentacool hits itself, and I finish it on the next turn. But the Staryu actually does damage to me, and my Confusion is only doing a third. And if it gets a critical hit with Water Gun, it might be able to knock me out, but it doesn't, and I end up winning. My prize for winning this battle is access to the move Leech Life. Honestly, not very good, but at least it is super effective against Psychic Pokemon as well as Poison-type Pokemon. Yes, the Poison and Bug-type interact weirdly in Generation 1, which was changed in Generation 2. After that, to grab a rare candy, I have to defeat 2 Fire-types, which once again are super effective against Venonat. However, they don't cause any problems, and then I go up against the Rival. Now with most Pokemon, he is not an issue at all. You usually have Body Slam or some other powerful move by this point, but for Venonat, it really doesn't have a lot going for itself. I'm just going to recap the current moveset for all of the audio listeners. Confusion, Leech Life, Supersonic, and Tackle. My most powerful move leverages my lowest offensive stat. My same type attack bonus move is base 20 power, and my normal type move has 95% accuracy. I guess in designing Venonat, the developers were really just trying to keep Venomoth away from players. After all, it is the best Pokemon in Generation 1 because it's a Ghost Dark type. Luckily for me, no problems against the Rival today, so let's dig back to Cerulean City and take on Misty again. Hopefully for the last time. Up first is Staryu. Still, I have to 3-hit this thing, which is kind of frustrating. However, now I do have Leech Life, which is super effective against the Starmie, and it does a lot of damage, about a quarter, and that was after an X defend. Honestly, in solo challenges, I have found that Leech Life is a decent move just because it gives you recovery. Being able to survive longer in a fight is critical when you only have one Pokemon. This is much less important if you can switch out to another Pokemon, but that of course is against my rules. Check them out in the description if you don't know what they are. So finally, after 4 hits from Leech Life, I am able to take out the Starmie, earn myself the second badge, and with it, the ability to use Cut outside of battle. And this allows me to backtrack to Vermilion City, once again bleeding more time. However, even though Venonat is awful, I'm pretty sure that it's going to beat Surge. Raichu starts the fight off using Mega Punch, doing about a third, and Confusion does what I can only describe as pathetic damage. Raichu uses Thunderbolt, taking Venonat to red health. Confusion continues to do pathetic damage. Raichu growls, I use Supersonic, it hits itself, alright, this is good. However, then it doesn't, hits Mega Kick, and Venonat goes down. Okay, for the third time in this run, I am going to abandon facing a major trainer and simply proceed with the next section of the game. So I guess I'm heading towards Celadon City. In my way is the Wrapping Lass. Luckily for Venonat, this is the first trainer that I usually talk about that is not an issue at all. Leech Life does 4 times damage to Oddish and Bellsprout, so I'm able to one-hit all of her Pokemon. I wish I could say the same for the first Pokemaniac in Rock Tunnel. This is the guy that you have all nicknamed Slowbone. He starts with a Cubone, and in this case, my bug typing is actually an advantage because Bone Club is not super effective against Venonat. Other poison types like Coughing and Ekans have struggled here in the past, but today against his first Pokemon, Venonat has no issues. But the Slowpoke that follows is a different story. It has super effective Confusion, which does a decent amount of damage to Venonat. However, using Leech Life, I'm able to deal a lot of damage and eventually knock it out. That wasn't that bad, so I figured that the next Slowpoke wouldn't be a problem either. However, this one is a higher level, and you'll also notice that I'm going into this fight damaged. That is because I have run out of healing items at this point, and I do not want to backtrack to buy more. I would have to go all the way back to Cerulean City, plus I would need to purchase more repels, because I only ever buy 3, which is the exact number you need to get through Rock Tunnel. I figured I would be fine against Slowpoke since I'm using Leech Life, which is a recovery move, and it's super effective. But things are very close to not being fine in this fight. I survive with red health. So now I have to go up against the Status Condition Junior Trainer in this position. Luckily for me in Generation 1, Leech Life is 4 times effective, so her Pokemon actually present an opportunity for me to heal, which is very convenient because coming up next is the Self-Destructing Hiker. For this battle, I'm going to have roughly 3/4 health, and I do have Confusion, a special move, which I'm hoping will do a lot to his Pokemon because they have really low special stats. But because Venonat also has low special, if I don't one-hit, it will give each one of his Pokemon the opportunity to use either Rock Throw or Self-Destruct, both of which will do a lot of damage to Venonat. However, since he doesn't have good AI, he has no idea which moves to prioritize, so he could also use Tackle or Defense Curl. I will have you know that I consider teaching Rest for this fight so that I would have a recovery option. However, teaching it this early on in a playthrough really constrains my moveset for the rest of the playthrough. Okay, so I've arrived, I've saved the game, let's see how this goes. Up first, of course, is Geodude. I go for Confusion, it does just more than half, and luckily for me, the Geodude uses Tackle. Okay, so I've made it to the second one with green health. Luckily for me, my Confusion gets the 10% chance to inflict a status condition, Geodude hits itself, and I knock the second one out for free. That means I have made it to his Ace Graveler with green health. And that is very lucky because this is the Pokemon that gets to self-destruct. Venonat just barely survives on red health, and with that I have beat him. However, that is not the end of my worries, because there is still one trainer left in the cave. This is a situation that is all too familiar for me. Whenever I was a kid going through Rock Tunnel, I just stumbled around because I didn't know the exact route to get through the area, and then by the end of the cave, I was always very low on health, and whenever I would run into a trainer, it always felt so hopeless. I had like one Pokemon remaining, it was probably Butterfree, and it had like a status condition, say Paralysis, and it was on low health. Then I would run into this junior trainer, and she would end my hopes, causing me to black out and teleport all the way back to the beginning of the tunnel. So there are probably going to be some resets here. Up first is Meowth. I don't do half to it. It uses Bite, taking Venonat down to 2 hit points. I take hit to a Sliver, and then it uses Growl, lowering my physical attack, which I guess is good because I finish it off. Next is Oddish, which is an opportunity to heal with Leech Life. However, because my attack was dropped, I do not knock it out in a single hit. What I was very worried about here was it using sleep powder, putting me to sleep, and then chipping away with absorb. Luckily, it uses stun spore. That's not usually a sentence I say in these videos. I hit and finish it off. All that's left is Pidgey. I am very lucky Gust is a normal type move in Generation 1, so I'm able to polish it off with Confusion and make it into Lavender Town. Now, I almost never talk about this location. Usually I'm talking about Pokemon Tower, but today I'm going to talk about it. I am healing in the Pokemon Center. This is something I almost never do. Whenever I have to make my way in here, I know that a playthrough is going badly. Also, just look up at the time. Like, we're almost at 45 minutes and I haven't even made it to Celadon City. Pokemon like Victreebel, Gengar, Nidoking, Vileplume, Nidoqueen, they have all finished the game at this point. Just let that sink in. Now, on the way to Celadon City, there is one mandatory trainer, this Gambler who has 2 fire types. Normally, I skip over talking about him because he's not really that relevant, but today I am going to mention him because the Growlithe takes 3 hits, and the Vulpix, which has higher special, takes 4 hits from Confusion. In this case, I'm getting stuck in a bit of a logical trap. Confusion has the higher base power, however, in this case, Tackle actually has the higher damage output. So, for example, against the Vulpix, Confusion does between 14 and 17 damage, and Tackle does between 19 and 23 damage. That means that Confusion has a 23% chance to 3-hit the Vulpix and a 100% chance to 4-hit, whereas Tackle has an 87% chance to 3-hit. By the way, if you're wondering how I calculated these damage ranges, I use a program called RBY XP Router. It records all of the events that I do in playthroughs, and then I can go back later on and see the exact damage ranges for specific fights. This uses my exact Venonat with all the exact same stats, stat experience, and DVs, and it also uses the exact Pokemon that the opponent's trainers have. I also wanted to check the damage output that his Pokemon have. So the first Growlithe does between 22 and 26% damage to Venonat. So the Growlithe does between 22% and 26% damage if it uses Ember, and the Vulpix does a little bit more, between 23 and 28%. That means if he attacks each turn, he will do roughly 1/4 of damage, and because in the best case scenario, it is going to take me a total of 6 turns to knock out his Pokemon, yeah, he could actually win here. Especially because Growlithe and Vulpix have, like, decent critical hit chances. If he attacked every turn and scored 1, I would have been defeated. Here is a list of all the trainer classes that have good AI in these games. They will always use moves that have a type that is theoretically strong against the opposing Pokemon's typing. I'm very fortunate that this guy is not a burglar. With him out of the way, let's finally at long last head into Celadon City. I explore the Rocket Hideout, picking up a PP up, and then I grab the rare candy. After that I head to the department store where I pick up 5 calciums, and then I hightail it towards Saffron City because here I can pick up the TM for Psychic and finally have a good offensive move. Yes, it is still using Venonat's low special, but at least it has high base power. And in Generation 1, it also has a 33% chance to lower the opposing Pokemon's special stat, so that's always a nice little bonus. As I mentioned, I grabbed the PP up from the hideout. I also got the one from Celadon City, and these are useful for Psychic because I can boost its PP. After all, it only has 10. Going to Saffron City this early in a playthrough is not usually what I do, however today it makes sense because I can just backtrack to Surge now and face him with Psychic on my moveset. If you're watching in the background, please just look over for one moment and watch how much Psychic does to the Raichu. Yeah, it only does 1/4. I cannot believe that. Any other Pokemon would have done at least 1/3, probably half. Still, this is enough for me to defeat Surge. After all, he is the worst gym leader. So with that, I can finally use Fly, and here I'm going to head back to Celadon City. The reason I'm doing this is because I want to take advantage of all of the trainers in Erica's gym. Venonat currently has a very good moveset to grind against all of their Pokemon. Psychic and Confusion are super effective against all of their poison types, and Leech Life is 4 times effective, and I can use it to heal if any of them get in a stray hit. Now, despite what I've said in previous videos, the experience yields in here are not particularly good. I have done a lot more research into that recently. However, with how badly Venonat is performing, I think it just needs to defeat pretty much all of the NPCs to get as much experience as is possible. After all, we have to remember that Lance has an Aerodactyl with super effective Fly. There is no way Venonat is going to outspeed it. Plus, if I make it past Lance, then I have to contend with the champion's Alakazam, and yeah, I'm probably not going to outspeed that one either. The experience from these trainers takes Venonat to level 34, and now it's time to face Erica. First on her team is Tangela. I go for Psychic and it does like a 5th. It uses Constrict and lowers Venonat's speed, so now I have 35 speed, which is slower than both the Tangela and the Weepinbell. Plus, I am speed tied with the Gloom. Yes, I am speed tied with the Gloom. It's like one of the slowest NPC Pokemon out there. I almost never say that. Making matters even worse, the Tangela gets a second Constrict in, which lowers my speed again. So now I'm slower than all of Erica's Pokemon. I knock out her lead, Weepinbell comes in, uses Sleep Powder, and now Venonat is asleep, taking chip damage from Razor Leaf, and actually decent damage from Acid. Now in Generation 1, Sleep is broken, because the turn you wake up you do not get to attack. That means Erica's first AI modification, which prioritizes using status conditions when your Pokemon does not have a status condition, kicks in and uses Stun Spore against Venonat, paralyzing it before I get my next hit in. Right now, I have 6 speed. That is not good. Venonat does level up here. It has the chance to learn Psybeam, which I guess is a good replacement for Confusion. It'll be great for grinding on a lot of poison and fighting types in the mid-game. Okay, so now let's face the Gloom. Luckily for me, since I have a status condition, it can no longer put me to sleep. It chooses Petal Dance, so it's locked into this move, which is really good for me. As a result, I get hits in, and I do manage to defeat Erica. However, it was a bumpy ride. You know what should be smooth sailing though? The rival in Pokemon Tower. The Furo's only flying type move is Mirror Move, and even though it does mirror Psychic against Venonat, it doesn't do that much damage, and I finish it off. The following Magnemite is not that scary, and then against both the Shelder and the Sandshrew, I have super effective damage with the new move that I just taught Venonat, Mega Drain. So I can use these two to heal up before his AC Eevee and easily finish it off. By the way, it makes sense that he hasn't evolved his Eevee yet because he hasn't got to Celadon City. However, I think for gameplay reasons, he really should have. It might have been nice to show him like backtracking from Celadon City just to really emphasize how far ahead of you he is. Plus, this team is never really a challenge. Like, this fight is much more difficult in Red and Blue, but in Yellow version, he's just kind of pathetic. As I head up the tower, the Chandlers are not going to be a problem because Venonat outspeeds their ghosts with super effective damage. Jesse and James are also quite simple, and now with the Pokeflute, I can gain access to Cycling Road. This area of the game is a really convenient place for Venonat to grind, because Psybeam and Psychic are both super effective against all of the Pokemon here. Now, Cycling Road is made up of 2 routes, Route 16 as well as Route 17, and in these locations, I fight all but 1 trainer. The only guy I skip is the guy that has a single muck on his team, and it's largely because getting to him is just a little bit inconvenient. During this grind, Venonat gets what is probably its best move, Sleep Powder, which I teach in the place of Psybeam. So my moveset is now quite good: Psychic, Sleep Powder, Leech Life, and Mega Drain. After completing the Safari Zone, I head into Sylph to continue my training. Completing runs with Ekans, Coughing, Zubat, Grimer, and the Nidorans has really taught me that poison types need to grind a lot in the mid-game, so I'm not going to take on any major battles until I've defeated most of the available optional trainers, especially the ones that you can't battle after certain story events play out. Now with Venonat, this additional training is quite slow. It takes a grand total of 7 minutes and 30 seconds. I should note here that during this training, I did have a single reset. It was against the Hypno Rocket. He originally earned his art because his team is challenging in a couple ways. First of all, the Golbat likes to start the fight off confusing your Pokemon, and then from there things only get worse if either the Drowsy or the Hypno put you to sleep. Also, their Psychic type moves are super effective against Venonat today. I didn't think it made much sense to just continue trying this fight and lose several more times, so I decided to fight other trainers instead. After I complete my training, Venonat is now level 47, which theoretically is very overleveled for the rival. However, let's be real, Venonat is not very good. Just look at it against the Sandslash using super effective Mega Drain. I do know that this is going to deal slightly less than Psychic, but I don't think even Psychic would have knocked it out in 2 hits. Luckily though, it stays asleep, so I don't get hit by annoying moves like Sand Attack. Now if you hadn't already guessed, what I am going to rely on in this battle is Sleep Powder. I'm going to have to put every single one of his Pokemon to sleep to take the least amount of damage as is possible. And that's because when I arrive at the Kadabra, it is going to move first because Venonat is very slow. So let's see how much it does. It uses Confusion, which is its least powerful move, and it does about a third. I am really lucky it didn't go for Psybeam or get a critical hit. Sleep Powder puts it to sleep, and I can use Leech Life to drain its health and recover Venonat's. After that, the rival only has 1 Pokemon remaining. It's Flareon. I put it to sleep, and then I use Psychic to knock it out over 4 turns. It takes quite a while. The next two battles against Jesse and James and Giovanni are actually very easy for Venonat just because it knows a psychic type move. However, next I'm going to have to face either Sabrina or Koga. I hope you see where this is going. Now, Venonat very technically has an advantage offensively against both of these trainers' primary typings. However, that is not how it plays out in practice. Sabrina is super effective against my poison typing, and the only bug move I have is Leech Life, which as we've gone over is pretty trash. And then Koga's team, which is supposed to be a poison type team, is instead filled with the Venonat line, and they have Psychic. Making matters even more complicated is the fact that after all the training in Sylph and on Cycling Road, Venonat is around level 50, and that is the level that all of the intimidating Pokemon on their teams are at. I figured that fighting Koga made more sense because defeating him now will give me a speed boost for Sabrina, and then maybe, just maybe, Venonat will be faster than the Abra and it can avoid Flash. So let's see how the gym leader, who is essentially the bug psychic type specialist, goes. An advantage for me in this fight is my Venonat is overleveled, so it outspeeds all of Koga's Venonats. You might be wondering why the speed discrepancy is so high. Well, that's the fact that Venonat has gained stat experience throughout the playthrough, whereas all of the AI Pokemon do not have access to any stat experience. So I move first against all the Venonats. I knock the first two out in a single hit, but the third one survives on a sliver. Luckily for me though, my Psychic gets the 1/3 chance to lower Special, so the Venonat's retaliatory Psychic doesn't do that much. I finish it off, and with that I am moving on to Venomoth. Now here I want to go over an AI interaction because Koga chooses Leech Life with his Venomoth when obviously the best move to use is Psychic. The reason he did this is because he has AI Modification 3, which by the way I think I'm just going to stop calling good AI because there is nothing good about it in many circumstances. It is the AI that the developers implemented to try to make the opponent make intelligent choices. However, in this case it doesn't do that because Venomoth just sees that Leech Life is super effective and then rolls it equally to Psychic. By the way, it is also seeing that Toxic is super effective, so yes, it can try to poison Venonat. Essentially, the opponent is just choosing moves that are super effective in type alone. It doesn't matter what the move actually does or how much damage it deals. I think this is why in Generation 2 they changed the AI to roll every move's damage range and then pick the one that does the most damage. This approach just makes much more sense, except in a couple edge cases. Now, getting back to the fight, as you saw, Sleep Powder worked, so I take a first attempt victory over Koga. Before heading to face Sabrina, there's a few things that I need to do. First of all, I'm going to go to the mansion because I can't actually use the one Carbos that is available to me here. Venonat can actually only take one more, so I'm very lucky that I didn't overtrain. After that, in Saffron Gym, I defeat 3 of the trainers to get a little bit more experience, and then I figured I was ready for Sabrina, so let's see how it goes. Up first is Abra, and yes, it outspeeds Venonat, hitting Flash, lowering my accuracy. I hit Leech Life in one hit, Kadabra's next. It goes for Psywave, dealing a pathetic amount of damage. My Leech Life hits, doing more than half, healing all of the damage. Sabrina uses an X-Defend. Leech Life misses. Kadabra goes for Recover. I hit Leech Life again, taking it back to orange health. And then I miss and get hit by Kinesis, lowering my accuracy once again. However, I do manage to hit and knock it out, so if I have good luck against the Alakazam, I am going to make it. Now you'll notice here that I'm going for Sleep Powder right away, and that is specifically because I want to put the Alakazam to sleep before it uses Reflect. I want my physical moves to continue dealing as much damage as is possible. However, using Sleep Powder, which only has 75% accuracy in the best case scenario, after 2 accuracy drops, ends up not being a winning combination. Alakazam uses Psychic, and Venonat goes down. Other than leveling up like 4 to 6 more times and getting enough speed to move faster than the Abra, this fight is essentially just going to come down to RNG. But if you've seen a lot of these challenges in Pokemon Yellow, you'll know that Sabrina's AI is really bad. She does not have AI Modification 3, so she's just randomly choosing her moves, and that leads her to sometimes spam Recover when she has full health, or just use Psywave, or with Alakazam, it could just continuously use Reflect. For that reason, I thought I was going to eventually get through this fight without having to train more. In the second fight, I once again have my accuracy lowered, and then I miss a ridiculous number of times trying to put the Alakazam to sleep. As you can see here, it is just doing nothing while I do this. Honestly, I think if I just used Leech Life, I might have knocked it out by this time. Anyways, eventually it hits Venonat, and that's my second loss. In the next fight, the Kadabra hits Psychic, and this does enough damage to knock Venonat out, and that made me realize that I should definitely be doing something else first. With most poison-type Pokemon, it is great to defeat all the trainers on Route 15 to get extra levels, so I'm going to do that now. Once that's complete, I defeat some trainers on Route 14, and then I head back to Saffron City to defeat the trainers in the Fighting Dojo. All of this experience is actually the perfect amount for Venonat because now it has 105 speed, meaning it is going to move first against the Abra, and it can dodge at least one flash. Kadabra's next, it goes for Psywave, I put it to sleep, and then use Leech Life to knock it out over 2 turns. Next is Alakazam, I go for Sleep Powder, I miss, luckily it just went for Recover on the first turn, then it goes for Psywave, doing a total of 2 damage, and I put it to sleep. So this is going to be it. I use Leech Life, it does almost half, and then Venonat gets a critical hit with its next one. So finally, Sabrina is no more, and now I have to look forward to fighting Blaine, who a lot of people actually think is really bad because they are used to playing Pokemon Red and Blue. However, in Yellow version, Blaine is one of the most intimidating gym leaders of all. I think in the coming days I definitely have to do a video ranking all of the major Pokemon Yellow trainers. Blaine is definitely going to be near the top of that list, so let's see how I deal with him in my first Venonat playthrough. Ninetales is first, and it is speed tied with Venonat. I unfortunately do not get lucky here. Ninetales moves first, uses Flamethrower, which by the way is a 1 in 4 chance because Blaine does not have good AI, and this does almost enough damage to KO Venonat. But still, it does end the battle because it inflicts a burn. I decided to face some of the trainers in the gym because I will lose out on this experience if I defeat Blaine with luck. After all, because he doesn't have AI Modification 3, there is a chance of this happening. It's at this point though that Venonat is starting to level up very slowly. Over the course of 5 battles, I am only able to increase Venonat's level by 1, from 56 to 57. I guess I'm just gonna go back and face Blaine at this level. It is important to note that this single level does really change the math against Blaine. Now I can put the Ninetales to sleep and knock it out without getting hit. By the way, I know that I'm addicted to sleep-inducing moves, believe me. I am trying to cut down on my use of them. In this case though, I think it is the right choice. Now Ninetales would have been a 4 hit if I hadn't got a lucky critical hit, knocking it out in only 3. Now from here, Venonat is going to underspeed, allowing the opponent to attack once first. Rapidash goes for Stomp, doing not very much, I put it to sleep, and now I can use Psychic to finish it off. This one also looks like it would be a 4 hit, however I do get another critical hit, so that is luck against both the Ninetales and the Rapidash. Please, just give me the same luck against the Arcanine. The game hears me, decides that I don't deserve that, Arcanine outspeeds, uses Fire Blast, and Venonat goes down. Okay, let's try again, and the game says, yes, let's try again. The Arcanine uses Fire Blast, and Venonat survives this one with 12 hit points. Arcanine goes to sleep, and then over the course of the next 3 turns, I become skeptical of the fact that Venonat is going to knock this thing out in 4 turns. It really looks like this is going to take a 5th and final Psychic, which is very annoying because the Arcanine just woke up. So the question here is one of the ages. William Shakespeare actually wrote of this. He said, to sleep powder or not to sleep powder? That is the question. And in this case, I decide to go for Sleep Powder, which luckily connects, allowing me to get another Psychic in, which crits and knocks the Arcanine out. Now, do you think that the difficult gym leaders are done for Venonat? If you said yes, you're actually right, because Giovanni is kind of trivial. In this case, once again, AI Modification 3 is the culprit. There is the potential at the beginning of this fight for Venonat to lose if, say, the Dugtrio hit a Fissure. However, in this case it doesn't, I finish it off. Then the Persian could also defeat me because it could use Slash. By the way, it always gets critical hits with this move, so it does a lot of damage. However, I make it past it, and that's where things get weird. On initial inspection, it seems like the Nido should be picking Earthquake for maximum damage. However, the AI doesn't quite work like that. When it checks type effectiveness, it just checks until it finds a viable matching, and then it goes on to check its next move. So in this case, it checks Earthquake against the Bug type, decides that's not very effective, and then it doesn't choose it. So in this case, both of the Nidos can either lower your defense with Tail Whip or Leer, or choose Thunder, which has a 30% chance to miss. Also, Venonat has super effective damage, so I'm able to finish off both of them in 2 hits and move on to Giovanni's ace, the Rhydon. Now, I am lucky that I got here with full health because this thing does know Rock Slide, and I do have -1 defense. I contemplated for a brief moment using Sleep Powder, but in the end, I decided not to. I went for Mega Drain, and Venonat gets a critical hit, finishing the battle off. We definitely need to do a post-mortem of that battle to go over some of the damage ranges, so let's do that now while I go and heal up and prepare for the rival on Route 22. First of all, at level 59, Venonat has no one-hits on any of Giovanni's Pokemon unless it gets critical hits. Yes, the Rhydon went down exclusively because I crit. Also, the Rhydon's Rock Slide would have KO'd Venonat. Without a defense drop, it's doing somewhere between 68 and 80% damage. So there's really only a few ways to win there. Either get my damage range good enough that I can one-hit the Rhydon with Mega Drain. To get just over a 50% chance to do that, Venonat would need to be level 67. Another way I could win is if Rock Slide misses or Giovanni uses a guard spec, but I think that the most reliable way to win is of course using Sleep Powder. And that is how I'm going to defeat the first 4 Pokemon on the Rivals team. Venonat has no one-hit ranges here, and I have to 3-hit the Sandslash, Cloyster, and Magneton. When I made it to the Kadabra, I realized that I was outspeeding because Aurora Beam dropped my attack stat. As a result, I just decided to go for Leech Life right away and hope, and in this case, the Kadabra just spams Reflect twice, and I knock it out, so I got very lucky there. Last, of course, is Flareon. I'm going to use Sleep Powder against it, because it's going to be a 4-hit with Psychic if I don't get a special drop. It does wake up, but I put it back to sleep right away and finish it off with 2 more uses of Psychic. Before I take on the league, there is one last thing to do. I'm going to travel all the way to the power plant to collect myself a 12th and final rare candy. I have saved all of these throughout the playthrough, so now I can use 11 to take Venonat up from level 62 to 73 before Lorelei. At the start of this fight, I want you to look at my PP. I have 16 uses of Psychic and 12 uses of Mega Drain. That means I have picked up a total of 4 PP ups throughout this playthrough. The 4th one was from the power plant, by the way. And I really want to mention that here because juggling these 2 moves is kind of unfortunate for Venonat. It's not really able to last particularly long in each fight, and that means if I have bad damage ranges, there is a worry that I run out of moves before I finish the fight. However, of course, once I make it to Lorelei's Slowbro, I can solve all of this by mimicking Amnesia and setting up my special so that I do more damage. By the way, I put it to sleep instead of just mimicking Amnesia and setting up right away because the Slowbro does know Psychic, and it's going to choose between Psychic or Amnesia on the first turn, then use Amnesia on the second turn, and then after that, Psychic is going to be hitting very hard. With Sleep, things are a little bit safer, and I finish it off, moving on to the Jinx. I also put it to sleep because it knows Lovely Kiss, and it can also freeze with Ice Punch. I do not want to mess around with that. I finish it off with 2 uses of Mega Drain, and now I have made it to Lorelei's final Pokemon. I go for Psychic, and I finish it off. Okay, time for some silly music while I sweep the next trainer's entire team. It isn't quite a perfect victory though, because the Machamp just barely holds on, and then I finish it off on the next turn. So, Venonat is level 74. I'm going to use my final rare candy to take it up to level 75 over a damage rounding threshold before I face Agatha. Now this fight is actually strangely easy for Venonat. I can use Sleep Powder, put the Gengar to sleep, steal Substitute, which blocks all confusion tactics, and then the only thing I have to worry about is Hypnosis. However, Psychic does enough damage to the Haunter to take it to red health, so that Agatha uses a Super Potion. It doesn't even get a chance to roll for the move. I finish the Arbok off in a single hit and make it to her final Gengar. Now, this one is going to be able to use Hypnosis, but instead it just breaks my Substitute with Psychic. Venonat strikes back with its own, gets a critical hit, and finishes her ace off. So it did outspeed me there. By the way, by 1 speed, it would have moved first and had another chance to get Hypnosis if I didn't get that crit. So once again, Venonat is getting very lucky at the end of these fights. But it's not going to get lucky against Lance. Like, honestly, it misses a lot of Sleep Powder against the first Gyarados. I probably just should have gone for Psychic and knocked this thing out right away. Now, the reason I say it's not going to get lucky is because Venonat has 163 speed, and that is after 1 badge boost from Gyarados' Leer. The consequence of this is that Aerodactyl is going to move first. It's going to choose either Wing Attack or Fly and deal massive damage. However, in this case, because of bad luck earlier in the fight, I make it to it with only red health, so either way I'm not going to survive, unless Lance gets a miss and Fly doesn't, so Venonat goes down. In order to make it through this fight, I need to get to the Aerodactyl with enough health remaining that I can survive one of its hits. Sleep Powder comes through for me, putting the first 3 Pokemon to sleep before they do any damage. I mimic Ice Beam and knock the second Dragonair out. Alright, so will I survive the Aerodactyl? And the answer is yes, because he uses Wing Attack. Ice Beam connects, Venonat gets a critical hit, and Aerodactyl goes down. I naturally outspeed the Dragonite, hit with 4 times damage from Ice Beam, and it goes down. Venonat has made it to the champion. Ordinarily, with poison types, the Sandslash is by far one of the scariest Pokemon in this battle. But in this case, my typing saves me there. Also, I can use Sleep Powder to put it to sleep, and then mimic Earthquake safely. However, once the Sandslash goes down, things get much worse, because Alakazam is faster than Venonat. By only 9 speed, it's pretty close, but not close enough that I am really disappointed. Still, that does open Venonat up to either a Kinesis or damage every time I face this thing. It's also worth noting that Earthquake is not a guaranteed one-hit against it. It only has a 67% chance. However, the Pokemon that I find really frustrating for Venonat is the Executor. Because of the 2 AI modifications it has, it knows when I'm asleep, and it knows that Psychic moves are super effective against Poison-type Pokemon. That means every time I am awake, it is going to try to put me to sleep with Hypnosis. Essentially, in this case, it is sleep or be slept, I guess. In this case, I am the one that misses, so Venonat gets put to sleep and Executor polishes it off. It's not even a guarantee that I make it to the Executor, because Alakazam can just critical hit with Psybeam, and in this case, even Psybeam finishes Venonat off. I really did think I would survive that hit, even though it was a crit. In my third battle against him, I get the best case scenario though, because Kinesis misses, and I'm able to finish off the Alakazam for free. I miss my first Sleep Powder on Executor, but it misses too, and I put it to sleep on the next turn. Then I have to finish it off slowly with Psychic. By the way, I'm using this move because it can go slightly faster than Earthquake, just because it can lower Executor's special, and then I'll do more damage on subsequent turns. I get 2 special drops along the way, and finish it off. Okay, so the Magneton is annoying if it uses Thunder Wave, and like most Pokemon, do not one-hit it even when they have Earthquake. For an example, please check out my Gyarados video. However, in this case, I miss Sleep Powder. Magneton uses Screech, which actually badge boosts me. It's kind of good because then I finish the Magneton with a single hit from Earthquake on the next turn. The following Cloyster I try to put to sleep, but it hits Ice Beam anyways, getting a critical hit, doing a lot. I only have under half health remaining for the rest of the battle. Cloyster wakes up right away, I put it back to sleep, and then I finish it off with 2 hits from Mega Drain. I probably should have just gone for that right away. It would have been more consistent. All that's left is Flareon, but Earthquake is going to be more than enough here. So in my first playthrough with the channel mascot's first stage, I was able to finish the game in 1 hour, 47 minutes and 19 seconds of real time, with 18 resets at level 77 and a game time of 6 hours and 12 minutes. Now before I jump into my optimized playthrough, I actually did optimize this route and record a second playthrough, and I'm showing you footage of it right now. However, I really didn't think I got good enough results during this playthrough, and I want to note that I played Venonat all the way back in June. Since then, I have done some major updates to my routing for Pokemon, and I wanted to try those out on Venonat to hopefully give it a better time. So now let's jump into my most recent Venonat playthrough and see how it can do. So to set the tone for this run, I need to mention how fundamentally inconsistent Venonat is as a Pokemon. Overall, in order to achieve a very fast time, I'm going to have to play very differently than I normally do in these playthroughs. But do remember, my goal is always the best possible real-time finish, so I'm going to do what is required to get that. This run starts off immediately with something that is slightly inconsistent, and that is the battle against the rival in the lab. In order to have a good start and propel Venonat with momentum into the rest of the playthrough, I need to win here. That doesn't always happen if the Eevee uses Tackle at the right moments, or sets up with Tail Whip and then consistently uses Tackle. Now, I'm going to mention that I started a lot of Venonat playthroughs. Like, I spent an entire afternoon just filming Venonat runs in order to get this specific run. So yeah, like, sometimes I lose here, sometimes I don't. Overall, though, I would say that Venonat wins the majority of the fights here, just because the rival's AI is just awful. It's randomly choosing moves, so normally you pull through. As a follow-up to this very close fight, I am also going to have another one just inside the entrance of Viridian Forest. The first bug catcher has 2 level 7 Caterpie, and each one of them takes 6 uses of Tackle for Venonat to knock out. Now, there isn't really another trainer that Venonat can defeat quickly. The next bug catcher has 2 Metapod, which is obviously going to take forever when you're only spamming Tackle in your level 6. The other potential option is the Lass on the other side of the forest. However, her Nidoran female has Growl, which can lower your attack stat, and that would also make that fight take a very long time. So overall, fighting this bug catcher is the best choice. However, I did have to restart some playthroughs because it is possible for him to win here if the Caterpies choose Tackle too many times. Now, clearing him is very important for Venonat because this gives me enough experience to get to level 7. And the reason this is important is because the next trainer I'm going to fight is the mandatory bug catcher who only has 1 level 10 Caterpie. This is another fight where I can restart the playthrough. And yes, I did several times here. It's kind of frustrating, but overall Venonat has decent odds here as well. So why am I taking such a risky route through the first portion of the game? Well, the reason is that grinding against wild Pokemon is just too slow to give Venonat a fast Brock split. If that split is not optimal, then the entire rest of the run is going to be delayed significantly, and Venonat will earn a much worse real time. So because the pain of restarting an entire run when you only have like 3 or 4 minutes on the clock is not really that bad, I feel comfortable doing it. I've done it with many other Pokemon. For example, a much higher ranked Pokemon, Clefable. I restarted a lot of playthroughs to get good metronome luck against Brock with that thing. So because this is part of my methodology, let's proceed. Once I reach Pewter City, I can heal in the Pokemon Center, and then I do something that I very rarely do. I am going to visit the Mart. I did not go to the one in Viridian City, specifically because I'm going to do all of my item purchases here. And I'm doing that for one reason, just because the Pewter City Mart has escape ropes, but the Viridian City Mart does not. I'm going to need one of these. I'm also going to buy some potions, 7, 1 Pokeball, and a Paralyze Heal. I want to spend as much money as is possible because next I am going to head into the Pewter City Gym and fight the Light Years Junior trainer. At first glance, this seems very unwise because he has a level 9 Diglett and a level 9 Sandshrew, and there is no way my level 8 Venonat is going to be able to defeat both of them. But that's actually the point. I want to lose after knocking the Diglett out so that I gain the trainer boosted experience from it, and then I can repeat this fight, defeating the Diglett over and over and over again, repeatedly gaining this 156 experience points. I call this blackout training, and yes, it is much faster than just grinding against wild Pokemon in Viridian Forest. Now I do want to mention a slight flaw in my previous methodology for this specific type of training. Whenever I used to do it, I would add a reset to the reset counter every time I would black out. However, I have since reevaluated that, so today I'm not going to be adding resets every time Venonat blacks out. I'm sure you're going to be wondering why, so let me explain. When I first introduced the reset counter, it was literally a reset counter because every time I would lose a fight, I would reset. I basically never blacked out during my playthroughs. Then later on, after a lot of comments from you, I realized that in some cases, blacking out actually makes more sense. However, in those specific instances, it was always the case that the Pokemon I was using had lost the fight fair and square, and then I just blacked out so that I didn't have to, say, reset before the previous gym leader. At that point, I made the decision to count blackouts towards the reset counter, and I didn't really think about the situation more than that. I believe now that that was a mistake. I should have investigated things a little bit deeper and created a rule that was more comprehensive. The reason I say that is that the reset counter was really introduced to count the number of times that my Pokemon, as well as I, fail to achieve my goals within a playthrough. So for example, if I have to reset because I've lost a gym battle, then they have failed to achieve their goal of defeating the gym leader. If I have to reset, for example, because I mess up teaching them a move because of the ordering of their moves, then I have failed as a player to recognize how that Pokemon uniquely needed to be taught that move. If I black out after facing a trainer because I failed to save, then that Pokemon failed to defeat the trainer. I didn't anticipate that, and so once again, it is a combination of the Pokemon and the player error that causes the reset. In this instance though, I actually want the blackouts. They are part of my strategy. Venonat is not failing to achieve its goal every time it faints here. It is succeeding in gaining experience quickly, where it would have gained experience slower if I had instead fought the junior trainer only when I had the ability to defeat him. So this isn't congruent with my goal to count failures if I count resets here. By the way, I do not remember all of the Pokemon that I have counted blackouts as resets for, so if you could please let me know in the comments if you remember one, that would actually be really helpful. I would like to go back and reset these counts in my spreadsheet just so that they can be fairly ranked with other Pokemon when using this metric. And all of that leads me to the fact that Venonat actually has a unique advantage against the junior trainer, which is it knows the move Disable. If you use this move against an opponent that only has a single move, then that Pokemon will not be able to move on that turn, but the following turn instead it will use Struggle, which actually does more damage than Scratch in both of these cases, which means as Venonat gets to a higher level, it can actually just start spamming Disable against the Sandshrew, which helps the Sandshrew knock it out faster using Struggle, and it prevents me from winning the battle, gaining Venonat more experience for a longer period of time. In total, I worked it out to be the case that usually I need about 10 blackouts against the junior trainer to gain enough experience to be around level 13. Once I get to that threshold, then I'm going to defeat the junior trainer, take all the experience, and backtrack into Viridian Forest. The reason I'm doing this is to fight wild Pokemon as well as all the trainers that I skipped when I made my way through here the first time. Now there are two potential levels that I want to end up at, either 14 or 15. 14 is riskier but much faster. It's risky because you only have a speed tie against the Onix, whereas 15 is a little bit safer just because I have an outspeed on the Onix. So now let's go into the Brock fight because this is actually going to be brutal. Initially, I thought the best way to defeat him was just level up to 19 and then crush his team with confusion. However, like I said before, if you really do want the best possible Venonat time with like a little bit of consistency, this is the best approach. The strategy here is essentially just spam Supersonic and hope that Brock's Pokemon knock themselves out with self-inflicted damage. While they're confused, I can deal a little bit of chip damage with Tackle, and then eventually once I make it to the Onix, if it is confused and goes for a move like Bide, I can use Disable to hopefully trap it for a longer extended period of time. So while we watch the footage of me resetting over and over and over against Brock, I want to draw your attention to the comparison between this approach and the approach with Confusion. When I did my follow-up playthrough and I used Confusion to defeat him, I was able to clock in with a Brock split of 23 minutes. Right now the time is around 13 minutes and we're going to go through a lot of footage very fast, so if you're sensitive to flashing lights or things moving very quickly on screen, just look away for now. I have many more resets here against Brock, and this is painful by the way. I had done so many Venonat runs the day I was recording this that at long last I just decided to reset against him. Originally, I was replaying the initial portion of the game all the way up to Brock and trying to defeat him without a save or any resets. This is of course the optimal thing to get the best possible result with Venonat. However, it felt inconsistent, so I thought that resetting here and accumulating a little bit more time, but eventually being able to finish a run would still allow me to clock in with a better final time. It is one of my deep regrets that making these videos I am on a tight schedule. It might seem like I have a lot of time to all of you, but whenever I have to do more than 2 playthroughs with a Pokemon, it really impacts my life. In this case, the footage we are watching right now is my 5th full Venonat run, and I restarted a lot. Just look at this folder of video files. These are all failed first attempts just trying to get past Brock. So all of that being said, this fight is very inconsistent, and as a result I do think that Venonat deserves to have these resets counted in its final time. Eventually though, I'm able to knock the Onix out, and my Brock split after 9 resets is 14 minutes and 53 seconds. That is more than 8 minutes time saved when compared with the Confusion strategy, and objectively I had a very bad time against him. If this had gone really well, there is actually the possibility of clocking in with a sub 11 minute Brock split with Venonat. So to summarize the early game, the strategy that I have employed is stacking risk and reward. It is risky, but the rewards are great. Even if things do not go perfectly, I am still going to get a better result than taking the ultra safe play. And at long last, I am so glad I don't have to talk about the Brock split anymore. Let's move on with the remainder of Venonat's 5th playthrough. On Route 3 I fight minimum battles with the Bug Catcher instead of the Lass. Then in Mount Moon I do some optional training, the Super Nerd, the Bug Catcher, the Lass, the Rocket so that I can obtain the Ether to continue fighting. I also defeat the Youngster, which gives me enough experience to learn Confusion, and then with a special move I can defeat the Hiker for additional experience. I follow this up by taking on the optional Rocket, the Super Nerd who is mandatory, as well as Jesse and James. All of this brings Venonat exactly to level 21. This is very important, not for the rival fight on Nugget Bridge, but for later on the fight against Misty. Now, I will mention here that the rival on Nugget Bridge is a bit inconsistent, mostly because of Sand Attack. I do have 1 reset here today, and then the second fight gets very close, but Venonat pulls through with red health. From here, it is minimum battles for the rest of the Nugget Bridge portion of the game. Then I head to Vermilion City before facing Misty. This is just so Venonat can train more. Fighting all the required trainers on this section of the game gets Venonat to almost level 27 by the time it's heading into Misty's gym. And that's very important because after I defeat the Goldeen trainer as well as Misty's Staryu, I level up to level 27 right before the Starmie comes out. This gives me access to Leech Life and an easy way to defeat her Psychic type Ace. I toyed around with the idea of using a rare candy there just to save some training in Mount Moon. However, overall I don't like that approach. I'd rather be 1 level higher for the rival fight. After all, you did see that it is pretty tricky. A little bit more HP and defense can't hurt. Plus, saving the rare candies for later on is going to be important. Now instead of fighting Surge, I'm going to go to Celadon City first, do the Rocket Hideout, buy myself some vitamins, by the way in this case, all Carbos to improve Venonat's speed, and then after that I am going to teach Venonat a move that I very rarely use with my Pokemon. I am going to learn Double Edge. Because of Venonat's strange base stat distribution, the fact that it has more attack than special means that Double Edge is overall going to be its highest damage dealing move throughout the mid-game. It's immediately useful against Surge because I have a good chance of knocking out his Raichu with 2 hits. Now I want to credit the person who gave me this double edge strategy because I would not have thought of it myself. Normally, I think that this move is completely trash because of the recoil, but for Venonat it really makes sense. His name is Redriosi and he was posting some incredible Venonat results. Reviewing his screenshots is what made me come back and do more than 2 playthroughs with this thing. I just didn't think that my second attempt did Venonat the justice that it deserves. So once again, thank you everyone in the Discord for following along with this challenge and doing your own Venonat playthroughs. It was great talking about this Pokemon with all of you, and thank you so much for helping me. If you want to participate in a similar challenge like this when I host them in that Discord server, check out the link in the description. Alright, so now we've reached the mid-game, and here Venonat is going to do a lot of training, and it's going to obtain all of its moves that it's going to need for pretty much the rest of the playthrough, with one exception. It has Psychic, Leech Life, Sleep Powder, and Double Edge. For my training, I am targeting level 48, just outside of the rival in Sylph. Along the way, I'm going to fight all the trainers that have good experience yields. If you are wondering which trainers these are, go and fight all the trainers while recording your route with RBYXP Router, and then look at the experience per second column that is provided to you there. Having reached my goal level, I'm going to now use 6 rare candies to take Venonat up to level 54. This improves the damage ranges against the rival here in Sylph, and it is also going to improve the damage ranges against Koga, who is coming up next. What I really want here is to one-shot all of the 3 Venonats, and then against the Venomoth, I just need to be able to survive one of its Psychics. If I can do that, I have a chance to use Sleep Powder to put it to sleep, and once that happens, I am able to knock it out. In this case, Venonat makes it through on its first attempt. After defeating Koga with Surf, I am next going to head to the power plant to collect one more rare candy. Now, this was my major innovation late into the playthroughs. I had done my 4th playthrough, and I just really wasn't happy with Venonat's consistency throughout Koga, Blaine, and Sabrina. Mostly because it just doesn't have enough speed to move first against many of their Pokemon. I toyed around with the idea of doing the rival and Koga at a lower level and having less consistency there, and then using later rare candies to be a slightly higher level for both Sabrina and Blaine. However, the better choice is to use 4 rare candies before Sabrina, taking Venonat up to level 62, where it has exactly 119 speed. This allows me to move first against both the Abra and Kadabra and one-shot them. As a result, I am always going to make it to the Alakazam. This greatly improves the consistency of the fight, and today I have no resets. The final piece of this puzzle is Blaine, of course. His Rapidash, which is his fastest Pokemon. It makes sense after all, the word rapid is in its species name. It has 118 speed as well. So, Venonat both outspeeds the Rapidash as well as the Kadabra after these 4 rare candies. As a result, against Blaine, I can just put all of his Pokemon to sleep and then use Psychic to slowly knock them out. There is some inconsistency here if you miss a Sleep Powder and he hits you with a super effective Fire move, but overall I am much happier with this result in the fight rather than underspeeding his Pokemon, which was my former approach. With Blaine out of the way, there is only one gym leader left, which is Giovanni, and here I'm going to change up my moveset by teaching Venonat Mega Drain in the place of Double Edge. The fight against Giovanni is probably the most erratic out of all the fights we've seen so far. I don't have a chance to outspeed the Dugtrio or the Persian, so I'm just going to have to luck out against both of them and get a Sleep Powder after surviving one hit. If I can do that though, I finish them off, and then I can move on to the slower Pokemon. All of these I outspeed, so as long as Sleep Powder comes through for me, I will be able to defeat them. Mega Drain is here, by the way, specifically so I can do a lot of damage to the Rhydon, because having it wake up and hit a Rock Slide is the worst case scenario. Because 4 Pokemon on his team have already gone down, if I reset here, it wastes the maximum possible amount of time. Now, the rival before the league does cause 1 reset today, just because the Magneton paralyzes me, but if that isn't the case, I outspeed all of his Pokemon, even the Kadabra, so as long as Sleep Powder cooperates when it really needs to, I am going to make it through this fight. From here in Victory Road, I train against 3 trainers, the Cool Trainer with the Persian and Ninetales right by the entrance, then the guy with the Fighting-type Pokemon, and finally the Cool Trainer with the Victory Bell line. That brings Venonat up to level 66 before it is ready for the League. Now, I honestly don't have a lot to say against the first 3 members. Venonat is actually very capable against all of them. What I really want to draw our attention to is Lance. Venonat has no badge boosting moves, and it has a low speed stat, so there is no way that I can outspeed the Aerodactyl. Lance has good AI, so he's always going to choose between fly or wing attack, both of which are super effective. This thing is an absolute monster, and it frustrated me so much with Venonat. I would have an exceptional run going where I felt like I was going to clock in with a time under an hour and 20 minutes. However, then the Aerodactyl would just knock me out like 10 times in a row and I'd get super frustrated. The reason it's frustrating is because I have to put it to sleep with my first sleep powder, otherwise it's probably going to take me out. I also have to survive whatever it chooses to use against me, which if it is a critical hit from fly, I definitely will not survive. In this playthrough, I had 3 resets against Lance, which was very frustrating in the moment, but eventually I do manage to defeat him, and with that, I have arrived at the champion. I have 1 rare candy remaining, which perfectly brings Venonat up to level 70. Alright, so let's see how this goes. My time is currently under an hour and 20 minutes, so Venonat could do this. However, it's going to require a lot of luck, because I basically need to put all of his Pokemon to sleep if I want to make it through his team. The Sandslash can do a lot of damage with crits from Slash. By the way, it is never going to use Earthquake, but Slash is very good. I need to play around that. Next is Alakazam. Of course I have to play around it. I don't have enough speed, so I need to tank a hit, survive, and then put it to sleep. In this case, it goes for Kinesis, which is frustrating to say the least, because now Sleep Powder only has a 49% chance to hit, and I will need to use it against the following Executor so that it doesn't use Hypnosis on me. I actually get lucky here and put it to sleep twice in a row, so well done, Venonat. I also should mention that I've kept Leech Life specifically so I have some recovery during this fight. I can use it to steal health from the Alakazam as well as the Executor, and then proceed to the final 3 Pokemon, hopefully on green health. Magneton's next. I put it to sleep, use Earthquake, knocking it out, and move on to the Cloyster. I really wanted to put this thing to sleep so that it doesn't do a lot of damage to me, because then the Flareon can knock me out with either Fire Spin or Flamethrower. In this case though, I miss a bunch, but eventually I do put it to sleep and move on to the Flareon, but I have low health. Sleep Powder needs to hit right now, and in the moment where it really matters, it does. Flareon goes to sleep, and Venonat is able to take it out with Earthquake. So Venonat clocks in with a real time of 1 hour 17 minutes and 50 seconds, with 16 resets at level 70. This was a game time of 4 hours and 39 minutes. So these results earned Venonat a placement in the E tier, just behind Doduo and just ahead of Horsey. While we're in this tier, I should mention that I have a new playthrough with Hitmonchan. I just haven't made a video with it yet. I plan to do that sometime in the next 3 or 4 months. I also really want to go back and do another Aerodactyl playthrough because I think I can improve its results significantly. So I'll stream those attempts when I get around to doing them. Coming back to this playthrough with Venonat, I think the one major flaw in today's run is the fact that I had so many resets against Brock. With my time constraints, there was no way around this, and overall I am quite happy with this playthrough. I think it had decent RNG, and it really showcased my best strategy using this tiny, cute, poisonous bug. So let's look at a couple analysis graphics. This one is the amount of time that I spent on each split throughout the run. You can obviously see in Venonat 5 that I was able to reduce significant time from the Brock split, but pretty much every other split is also much faster. Really, the only other split that takes the same amount of time is the Rival 5 split, mostly just because I have to fight a lot of trainers to level up this weak first stage Pokemon. Granted, my split in the second run is a little bit faster there, and I'm going to attribute that to the fact that in the first run I didn't really fight the optimal trainers, whereas in the second run I targeted only trainers that have good experience yields. If we look at the chart showing levels by trainer, you can also see here how in the second run I was able to more efficiently allocate my rare candies. So in the first run I saved a lot until later into the playthrough just before Lorelei, whereas in the second run I know to use them earlier on to make certain key battles easier for Venonat. That can be seen in the major mid-game level differential. However, in the late game, I'm also going to finish the game at a lower level, which is overall better because if you save levels, you also save time. Granted, of course, you do want to have a consistent strategy. And this final graph shows real time by trainer, and here you can see that in my second playthrough, I was always faster, and significantly so. While you do earn an advantage in the first Brock split, by the time the early game has stabilized, my lead is significantly more. And then in the late game, because of my optimization, the lead only increases. Overall, I am really satisfied with these results. I was able to improve Venonat's time so much. This might be one of the the best reductions in time from a first to final playthrough when the runs were all played in this close of proximity to each other. Alright, so that is it for Venonat. We are going to continue to let the credits roll, and if you want to stick around, I am now going to face the Hidden Oak battle. I always do this battle for fun after I defeat the League, and by the way, a Venonat that is level 70 is just going to get completely destroyed here. I filmed this Oak battle after my second playthrough, so you can see my second playthrough results in the top left. It was 1 hour and 39 minutes and 32 seconds. Really not that good. Granted, this approach is much more consistent because I'm aiming to outspeed the Alakazam in the champion fight. Also, this speed really helps when I go up against Oak. Without the ability to outspeed the Arcanine and the Charizard, things are brutal here for Venonat. I tried to beat him with the lower level Venonat, and the only way I was able to do it was using the Tauros to badge boost me with Leer or Tail Whip so that I outspeed the Arcanine and the Charizard. However, in order to make that happen, I had to level Venonat up so that it didn't level up mid-battle before either one of these Pokemon. Ordinarily in these videos when I face Oak, I do not allow the Pokemon to do any extra grinding before they take him on, they just have to go in immediately after the champion. Granted, this battle is not used for ranking purposes in any ways, so it doesn't really matter in the end. Overall, I just thought at level 70 or 71, Venonat is too inconsistent here, so at level 80, it's much easier. I can outspeed all the Pokemon, put them to sleep with Sleep Powder, and defeat them. So, Venonat, I absolutely loved you when I was a kid, and after this video, you're starting to feel a little bit similar to Seal. Doing these playthroughs was really brutal. I hope you enjoyed this video. It is significantly longer than most of my single Pokemon videos. I hope that that's okay with you. I like to go into detail on everything, so the videos end up being as long as they need to be. Thank you so much to everyone who supports me through YouTube memberships or through Patreon. You allow me to make these videos how I want to make them. Also, if you have made it this far, you were incredible. I'll see you next time.